Okay, hello everyone. I don't even know what I'm going to call these programs anymore, but it doesn't matter. I've got a new person that's going to come on. Her name is Elizabeth Wallace, and I'm going to have her sort of talk about herself and whatever she wants to introduce.
Hi. Um, yeah, as you said, my name is Elizabeth Wallace. I am a self-diagnosed uh, autistic on the autism spectrum, whatever. When I first learned about this, it was Asperger's that I was identifying with, and like whatever the way we've modeled these things has changed a little bit. People don't tend to use that. I made this discovery when I was a teenager in the, I guess, early 2000s. Um, and now I am a mother. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have a degree in mathematics, and yeah, I guess that's
Okay,
basically
okay.
me.
Yeah, I know Elizabeth through her YouTube channel of it's Theory of Mind on, of course, on YouTube, and let's just encourage people to go see what she has to say because that's what interested me, and even wanting to talk with Elizabeth here was that I liked what she had to say and I learned a lot from her. So, and we just sort of said let's just do something, and we're going to talk actually today. I left a comment on her one of her last YouTubes was about the whole self-discovery and how much it's changed. It's been 2 years. It was 2 years this month that I was actually diagnosed, and a couple of months before that I went, this is me, and it's just been an amazing ride. You said it was early 2000 that you discovered. What was that like for you? Crisis, or was it like, yes, finally?
It was really, I can't even think of the right word. It was a big relief, and it was
Yes.
super useful. So sort of what happened is, I mean, from what we can tell, it seems like the autistic streak is on my maternal line. Um, and had definitely never been diagnosed before. Of course, they weren't even really diagnosing women and girls until relatively recently. Um, but my grandmother, yeah, I definitely see it with her. And my mom started learning about Asperger's, and she's like, "Hey, I think you should check this out. I think this describes you too." And she went through a process of, like, she participated in this university study or something where they were diagnosing people, and most of the doctors said they thought that she had it, but like the head person in charge of the research didn't. And that was when she was in her 40s, and it was a weird experience for her because it was sort of validating, but it was also like, I mean, for me, knowing that happened, what I took away from it was like, I don't really think it's worth it to try to get a diagnosis because, um, one of my ways of coping with my autistic traits living in this world is to really limit my stress as much as possible. And so it just seemed like the input of effort and stress I'd have to put out into it would not pay off, even if I got a diagnosis. It would
Yeah.
just be like, okay, so now I'm validated, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it would get me some things, but I don't feel like it was. I didn't feel at the time, especially, like it would be enough to be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I just know that uh, I did it because, well, my story is kind of weird. When I found out, when I found out about this, I was already under a lot of stress. So it wasn't I mean, and it was stuff was failing at work. Definitely, I had a communication breakdown. I thought I was out of there, and I never forget that moment was when the boss had said, "Well, it just sounds like you really don't want to work here anymore." I mean, it was like that kind of thing. It was like, and it would threw me off so much. I'm like, oh my God, what I just, I knew that there were some things I was upset about. I sure didn't think I was coming across like that. And, and just everything kind of came together. And I said, this was me. This is something else going on. And it was just, the beginning. That was in a few weeks or whatever later, I started looking into Asperger's, and but it was I was going to say I ended up going to the doctor because it shot my heart rate up. I must have had like some sort of an adrenaline dump because um, I think it was like I said, I always had stress going on, but my my heart rate shot up to it was at 150 at times sustained, and I mean we're talking this lasted for like 2 months, and but I went into him after 2 weeks, and I just went in for the heart, and he said this is adrenaline related. He was smart enough to go. This is symmetrical. The way the arrhythmia here. Um, he said that's from adrenaline, and it clicked. I went. I know what it is. That's what I said to him. I said, Doc, I was going to tell you this after we finally went through this, but I really and I started crying. I mean, he was like, I mean, it was like bang, just like somebody flipped a switch. I was like, oh my god, I think I found this. He said, and he was like so professional. He said, okay, we got to figure out the best way to get you diagnosed then, and that's why I got diagnosed.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. God, I just love that guy. He just was
Yeah,
couldn't handle this better, and he just like, okay, I believe you.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, but talk about change. I just it was it has been. I mean, now I'm going. See, I'm also ADHD, dyslexic. This was
Mm.
diagnosed when I was this is back in '69, and they didn't do anything for anything then. At least I don't, at least in my school they didn't. And of course, I don't know if they even suspected autism. I don't know back then. Uh, but so it's just been, I've not only had to embrace, I've embraced it all. I mean, because that's what I think at that time, it kind of had me, I think my parents had a weird reaction to it. I was told that I was considered learning disabled then. Um, uh, they said I'd probably never graduate from high school, and
Mm.
that's kind of a thing. So it was like, I think that changed the dynamics at home, and I think I could feel that, and I think that made me pull that self that I really was farther inside.
Mm.
So that's what I'm kind of dealing with now is trying to get that open back up and really say, oh yeah, your dyslexia is worse than you've ever, that's why you're doing this, Tom. And I see all these things I'm doing. It's like, well, that's why you're doing this, Tom. So that's what it's been for me for the last 2 years.
That's interesting because I guess in some ways I had kind of the opposite experience in that when I was struggling in school, and this is what really brought me to embrace all of this. I was really struggling in school, in middle school, high school, and my mom actually went to get me tested for learning disabilities, and I didn't have any. Um, and they said my IQ was high, and there was no, you know, and basically when it came to tests and stuff, and this is a really common thing for people on the spectrum and people with ADHD too, when it came to tests, I could always ace the test. That was never a problem. I understood the material, but it was everything else. I was really struggling to turn in homework. I was remember dates, keep track of projects, um, all that kind of thing. And so pretty much I just got the label, instead of getting the label learning disabled, I got the label of lazy. And I'm clearly if I'm smart I must be able to do these easy things, so why would you get any help? you know
Wow.
what you're just treated like it's your fault, and that it's something,
Wow.
these are choices that you're making because you don't care or whatever, or because you want to be a bad kid. And I kind of gotten to the point where I had more or less accepted those labels. It's like, oh, I guess I must just be a bad kid. Why bother trying if it's not going to work? I'm not going to be able
Wow.
to do it. I'm not going to get any help. Like, why? you know and it got bad. It got to the point where, I mean, I think I would have graduated high school if I'd stayed on that course, but I would have graduated with very poor grades. um and finally, when I started learning about, again, at the term Asperger's at the time, it just, everything clicked into place. It suddenly all made sense. And, also, I'd gotten to this point where I was having shutdowns all the time and I didn't know what they were and nobody knew what they were. And I wasn't getting, it was assumed that when I would shut down and not be able to process language and, you know, have to go in a dark room and be completely still for however long it took me to be normal again, that was seen as a performance.
Oh,
So again, that there wasn't any empathy, there wasn't any help.
hmm.
Um, just this was yeah, this everything that wasn't understood was just placed on this is something you're doing to be rebellious.
What year?
you
What
know,
years were you in school? What time frame is this?
well, I was a freshman in high school in 2000. I mean, this continued to the shutdown started at some point after that, and just continued into my senior year. And it was, you know, sometime in there that I started talking to people in online communities, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's a shutdown, and this is what you can do to prevent them." And I'm like, "Oh,"
No
and
kidding.
have them barely ever for years after that. I had maybe two in the next 10, 15 years.
Well, just
um,
describe a shutdown, because this is one thing I'm trying to define in myself is what meltdowns are, what shutdowns are, and I think they're different for everyone. But I think there's a common uh, cause, or there's some sort of a similarity. Even though we're all different, that we seem to share something. It's all there's a connection there. I don't even still can't really describe it, but it's but just
yeah.
describe what it was to you.
Um, well, I mean, I guess I would imagine that it's because, you know, we have different experiences, but it's basic, more or less the brain doing the same kinds of things or our
Yeah,
nervous system doing the same kinds of things. But, you know, of course, we're going to experience it a little differently because we have different brains and different bodies and whatever. But I think it
yeah.
is the same basic processes that are happening, right? That's my assumption, I guess.
That's yeah.
But when I have a shutdown, this hasn't really happened in quite a while, but um, the way I remember it is it would always happen when I was having a conversation. It was usually a conversation with my parents where they were getting on my case or something. So it's kind of stressful conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and then eventually my reaction times, not even that's not even the right word, my ability to process the language in the conversation would just start slowing down. It would get to a point where like slowly I just have to think longer. I have to like they'd say something and I kind of wouldn't really understand the words.
Yeah.
I'd have to wait and let my brain remember, okay, this is what these words mean and this is what they're talking about. And then I'd have to, you know, actually formulate a response and translate that into words and then say the words. And that process is normally automatic, right? But or feels kind of automatic,
Right.
but it would just start grinding to a halt
Mm-hmm.
to the point where I just couldn't really respond, or it might take me a few minutes to respond. Um, and so that, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, and what I learned from these Asperger's groups is that, you know, it's really a cumulative thing. Like it wasn't just the conversation that made this happen. It was the previous month of not caring for myself very well, not eating at regular times, being under too much stress, drinking too much coffee, not getting enough sleep, all this stuff. Um, and, you know, eventually it makes, it puts you in a vulnerable place for something to just push it over the
Yeah.
edge.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's interesting because that's why I enjoy talking to other people about their experience, because I'm I'm getting to be fairly sure that how to put this, I have I'm not speaking. I'm going nonverbal here. Oh, when I get in stress, it can be just even like now. I'm like I've talked with people that are on the spectrum. I was actually working with a friend doing some video editing who's on the spectrum, and if I'm like very, if my brain is busy trying to work on editing and doing this and that, and also the pressure of performance is terrible for me.
Mm.
That I start, I can't think of the names of things. I mean, it's like I said that word's gone. I said, what's that called? And it's like, it's a button. It's like, okay, that, yeah. Um, but and it's this is what I think is fascinating. Um, Something like I've the only thing I can say is meltdowns. I was with a couple of some ASD friends up in Canada, and one of them is actually a psychotherapist, and I was really stressed out from the drive. We had been busy that day, and I stayed up till midnight. So I had like basically like a 24-hour day of stress. And I got up the next day, and I woke up, and I had this headache, and I thought, okay, and it's funny now that I'm looking at it. Instead of getting out of bed, then I'm like, oh, you shouldn't get out of bed. You're going to disturb people. So I laid there with the headache for an hour, and I was starting to get nauseous. I was starting to get sick, and I said, hey, do you have aspirin or something? She said, what's wrong? And I just started crying. And I just said, I'm so sorry. And she said, you're having a meltdown. And I said, no, I just have a headache. I'm so, it was the stress. And she, yeah, yeah. And she started going by blow. Says, and I said, but this headache. She said, that's because you're suppressing this right now. And she just started just like a sports announcer, going, okay, you're feeling this now? Yeah, well, that's because you're doing this. It's like, but anyway, she said, that was a meltdown. And I've sort of said, I just had a headache. I didn't. Oh, and the other thing is, I may have said on the channel is I'm finding pretty intense alexithymia, not being able to figure out what is causing what, this feeling or this emotion or this pain or whatever. It's like, it's not usually not until it's enough to get my attention, if you know what I mean. So because I can just focus and like, yeah, yeah, I don't need that, I want that, or I don't feel that, or does that make any
Right.
sense?
I no, I no, alexithymia is a really interesting topic to me because I'm not sure whether or not. I mean, I definitely don't have it full blown.
Okay.
That I don't have the experience that some people describe of, really not being able to identify their own emotions or other people's emotions, like more or less at all. I definitely do, but there's certain things that I really relate to. Um, like for instance, I've been going through a difficult emotional time with respect to a conflict, um, and possibly the end of a very long-standing relationship. So one thing that I've been doing kind of automatically, and I realize I've been doing this for years, it just depends on how big the emotion is. If I have a really big feelings about something, really complex feelings about something, what I do is um, I make some kind of art, or I make I've been making all these YouTube playlists. I do this to process my feelings, and every time I listen to them, or every time I look at this thing or whatever it is, I get something more out of it. Like I understand how I feel better, if that makes any sense.
Once you've made the YouTube, you mean you'll look at it and see how you
Yeah.
express yourself? Okay.
Uh,
Yes.
like I've been listening to this playlist and changing it slightly for months now. But and that's process has helped me to understand what I feel like. Yeah, every time I listen to it, I get something a little more about like, oh, that's why I chose this song. Like
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's a level of it's challenging to sometimes to take, and I definitely relate to this idea of like that people with alexithymia talk about, which is like they might describe their emotions more as shapes or as colors or kind of ideas like rain or so stuff
Hmm.
like that, more abstractly and less in words. And I definitely relate to that when it comes to some like a certain level of emotion. I just can't.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting. I need to read up. So, I've been so focused on autism, and my friend was saying, you said you're dyslexic. I said, yeah. I said, do you think in 3D, or do you, yeah, I guess that's the way she put it. And I thought, think in 3D. I mean, and it's like, well, I guess I do. I mean, when I don't, I always thought it was because of I have a good mechanical sense, and maybe, and so that when I make things or when I think through procedures, I guess that is a spatial thought. I mean, um, I don't know if it's so much as can I rotate things in space? Well, yeah, I mean, I think everybody can do that to a certain degree. At least I think that when people think of things, it's but it just made me think of like, oh wow, so there's even that is going to change who I am. I mean, I always thought dyslexia was flipping letters on your when or whatever when you're reading, but I guess it's much more. Uh, the effect is much more than that. So there's
Yeah, yeah, dyslexia is really interesting. I don't know much about it, but I do have some friends with dyslexia and dyscalculia.
okay,
Is that how you pronounce it? Um, and I've looked into it just a little bit as a tutor, because I've been a math tutor for a long time. Um, to work how to work with students, and like yeah, there's a lot there. There's some real a lot deeper differences than that, than just flipping letters in
yeah.
terms of like how you process information and stuff.
Interesting, because and this is something I wish. I mean, of course, this I can't go back to 1969, and I mean, they probably didn't know much about anything then. It seems, at least as far as disorders and helping students. But if somebody had just, I mean, I always knew about it, but it was actually at the time something that, like I told you, I could sort of sense there was a change in my parents and school and all these things, but nothing was really said other than, yeah, you're going to be in this class, or
Right.
whatever. It's like, okay, I didn't think, and I had so withdrawn. It was part of it was my father. He was very, very he was always walking on eggshells, and he had a way of sort of like using love as a tool and that whole kind of a
Ugh.
thing. And so it was like if I wasn't doing meeting his expectations, I was worthless. And of course,
Right.
you could never meet his expectations. Was basically the bottom line. And so all of this stuff started just to play in, and that's when I really started to say, okay, no, the way that you were interacting socially was a big cue. I mean, that's where you kind of pick up that there's a difference. Uh, but then, and I was afraid. Instead of saying, "Hey, I need help with this in school or even with my parents," I was like, "Just be the silent kid. That's what causes the least troubles. Is just smile and sit there and just go through with it." So that's like we I'm free, I can start, but it's and I sometimes I feel like I'm in high school. um I mean, as far as I think there's part of me that probably still is in high school, grade school, in some of my developmental stages, but that's weird to say, isn't it? Been an interesting process. It has. um
Yeah, I feel really lucky that, I mean, it seems like, your generation versus mine, I never had so much shame attached to this kind of thing. And especially a lot of people my age, are more often diagnosed with neurodivergence stuff. And there's, I think, much more often an attitude of openness and an attitude of okay, we're valid, we're not throwaway people,
yeah.
we it's okay for us, it's good for us to have our accommodations, we need to ask for that, we need to demand that, and we can do really cool things with our lives, and it's not a death sentence,
Yeah.
like I feel like it's just that the attitude's really shifted, so I feel lucky that I didn't have to bear the burden of that.
Well, I've looked back and I said, I mean, if I had known then, I mean, again, first of all, when I was really looking at the history of autism, it was still thought of as, well, it was at the edge of being still thought of as a type of childhood schizophrenia. It wasn't a developmental disorder yet until it was the PP, pervasive developmental disorder, as in the DSM. I think it was 3. in 80 when that changed. And so I was like 10 years before I mean, they were thinking it wasn't a schizophrenia by then probably, but they weren't treating it that way professionally. So I thought, well, maybe it's best I wasn't diagnosed. And I've talked to some people who were, and I even asked the question on Quora. I don't know if you've ever written on Quora or know of Quora, but it's a, yeah. And I asked that question of anybody that was diagnosed in that time period, were you facing institutionalization or what? And one person that did write back had said, my cousin or my sibling or whatever was. My parents said, no way in heck, now she's got a family and kids and, other than being institutionalized. So that was the kind of stuff that was UK too. That wasn't the US, but I don't think there's any difference in much.
Yeah.
So,
Um, yeah, that was the attitude, and I've had, experiences with older family members, and this is related to, bipolar stuff, although I definitely think there's some interesting relationship between autism and bipolar, but yeah, who, when I was in a psychotic state, they were basically like, well, why don't you just put her away, like, um, just brush her off in an institution, because that's what they used to do to everybody who didn't fit in, right? Like, it's just,
amazing, isn't it? Just, I mean, I'm so it's so amazingly sad, and I keep thinking too about the people that are in that area that's still happening to them. That they're whether it's autism or whatever the disorder, that whether it's kids or adults. Um, there's just a real need, and I don't know. I mean, I keep saying that's the community. We really need to pull together as a community, and this stuff has to stop somehow. I mean, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm writing on Quora. Um, that's why I try to at least. I don't know. It's sitting in silence is the worst thing I feel I can do. I've got to do something.
I mean, I do feel like, despite the fact that stigma around certain labels, um, I'm not saying labels in a bad way, but just, diagnoses or whatever, it, but the stigma around the names of those things has definitely changed. What I don't think has changed as much is that when it comes to just people's traits when they're neurodivergent or whatever, um, are still really stigmatized, and there's a lack of empathy at a certain point,
Yeah,
um, which is part of why it can be a relief to have the official label, is because then you can be like, oh, see, now, my behaviors and my, traits are real. They're
yeah,
not, things I'm doing to annoy you, and now now you need to give me accommodations. So it changes the conversation somewhat, but I mean, it just seems like, yeah, there's just still a lack of empathy and a lack of interest to understand other people's experiences.
yeah.
uh,
That's why I think we all need to advocate for ourselves, but also the opportunities to educate and advocate, um, because and I'm not talking about presentations and things, but I'm talking about just that there's an opportunity that someone says, well, I heard this, and you go, no, that's not true, or I mean, if the opportunity exists there, but I mean, it's easy to just kind of go, oh, well, the person doesn't know what they're talking about, when sometimes you can find ways of helping to educate and enlighten the public more. You're doing that with your
I mean,
channel, you know.
yeah, that is the vision of my channel, and my Facebook page too, which highlights other people's perspectives. My YouTube channel is about my own, but
What are they
I mean,
called?
but the
Introduce
oh,
them.
my Facebook page.
Both of them. Yeah. Well, you did say.
Oh, it's I have very mixed feelings about the name, but it's difficult to change. It's called Real Talk About Personal Issues.
Okay.
Um, and so I I try to paint with a not paint with a broad brush, but it's a very broad topic, which is really just like other people's personal stories, but I really try to focus on stories that we don't hear every day,
Good. Yeah.
that aren't mainstream narratives. But that means all kinds of stuff, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it's very open ended.
Okay.
So I definitely, disability is one of my focuses,
Okay.
but I'm really interested to just kind of curate and hear from all kinds of people about things. Also topics that we may not feel comfortable discussing, things that are personal, things that are painful,
Yeah.
um, that we'd really like other people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you've touched on suicide and ideation, and that's a big one. I think it's one of the ladies on the Facebook group that I'm a part of was talking about that, saying, you know, because she has an issue with she gets stressed, and that's what comes to her mind is this is I'm worthless. I've got to end this, you know. I mean, it's, you know, and she said, and of course she's fighting it, you know, but that's still the reality of her life, and I think it is. If you look statistically, and from the one statistic I focused on, I don't know if they've got this down to a science or not, but it was 1 in 3 attempts or completions of suicide, and 3 out of 4, well, yeah, 3 out of 4 ideation. You know, people consider that as an option, I guess is what how I describe ideation. So that's just one of so many important topics, but that's, you know, there's just so much of that out there that needs to be talked about. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of, especially when there's misconceptions,
yeah,
um, and yeah, I mean, to bring it back to autism generally, there's a lot of misconceptions, which is one of the reasons that, in my personal life, it's not something I tend to talk to people about unless it's really necessary for them to know for some reason,
yeah,
because it's an exhausting conversation. They don't expect, um, I mean, yeah, they don't expect somebody who's autistic to look and be like me. Um, and I can be very good at masking if I have the energy to. I can be very, I mean, I'm still weird. I still come off as weird, but I don't come off as, I can make it seem charming. I guess.
do you feel you're masking
But,
now?
huh?
Do you feel you're masking
Uh,
now?
I mean, to some extent.
Okay, yeah, but I mean not your. But this is Liz. But you say this is Liz?
I mean, I don't think okay. I mean, for me, just the way that I've learned to and been able to cope and adapt, I don't really see my masks as being not me. It's just, but it is a performance. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah,
And not, it's not a performance I always have, um, energy to do on
yeah,
full blast.
yeah,
um, which is part of the way that I've coped. Since being a teenager, is to learn how to limit the situations in which I need to do that, because that's energy down the drain basically, and
hmm,
I can't, like, I've avoided certain kinds of jobs, um, because I knew they would stress me out too much. I've taken part-time jobs even though I was very poor, because I knew I would be better off having less money than spending that much of my energy. Um, and I've definitely tested those limits before, and always found out that when I didn't listen to myself about what I needed, and when I wasn't sensitive to that, it always blew up in my face and
mm,
left me worse off than I was before. So it's a calculated risk really to do anything, but I definitely try to, and I've been wrong. I've still been wrong even doing that. I've overloaded myself, being a little optimistic about what I could handle. So
that's,
it's a tricky balance,
yeah,
especially when a lot of shame that you get from people like, why aren't you working 40 hours a week and going to school full time like I did, whatever. You're just lazy. And been it's it, it's a continual thing, trying to unlearn, trying to not listen to those
yeah,
voices even when they mean well.
yep, yep. Wow. And have you kept track of time? I'm completely have lost. I can look at.
It's a 11:35. I'm not sure exactly when we started.
Because I'm looking at my tape, and I think I have that is. See, I don't know if I reset my counter on the taper. Just what I'm thinking. Has it been an hour? Could it have been an hour already? Okay, good. I'm looking to going. Okay, this is amazing. I'm not so panicked now. Um, I don't know where to go. I don't want to. I that threw me off. And this is how my mind works. It doesn't work. No, it's just I'm very distractible. I think, and that's probably the ADHD. Um, I don't know. I don't know. So
Well, I was going to say, just as a kind of aside, we were talking about, your story, and it reminded me of. I mean, the outcome was very different for him, but it reminded me of somebody else I know who is, I guess he's in his 70s.
wow.
Must be true. Um, 60s or 70s. But when he was a teenager, around the same time, um, I mean, they knew he was dyslexic and he has ADHD. He definitely has ADHD, but I don't think that was he was not diagnosed with it. I don't think it's a discovery he's slowly made on his own. But he started using meth as a teenager because I mean he was kind of self medicating, and he's continued to use it at a relatively modest rate um, since then, more or less. Uh, and it's I mean he does basically use it, I think, as self-medication for his ADHD, but I think there must be a big blockage for him, I guess, in terms of like going and trying to get it actually treated by medical professionals, because he was very much kind of seen as like the bad kid
Hmm.
in the family. He was cast in that role because I think probably largely because of his ADHD.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
So
it's. I
that's the way.
mean, if he'd get professional help, he could have uh, one of the Adderalls or the Vyvances, or even I don't know if they're even using the Ritalin anymore, but um,
They do, but it's
yeah.
nobody likes it.
I, I
But
I have a picture of myself, and I finally made the connection. I always looked at that picture, going, "Wow, you look weird in that picture." That was when they had me on Ritalin, and I was only
mm,
on Ritalin for maybe I don't even remember. It wasn't long because I can remember. Oh God, I remember taking one in the morning, and on the bus it was like, because it hits your system all at once, and then it dumps after like I think it's only like a 4 hour life. It's like a way up in the goes to the peak and then it just drops you. And I think I've tried them all. I'm still taking Vyvanse, but I'm just taking a smaller dose, and I do it. And I talked with the doctor, and he said, as needed is fine. It's actually probably better for you to take breaks and get away from it and let your body readjust to no stimulant. But it does help. It does help. Um,
yeah, I've heard good things about it.
yeah, yeah,
I don't. I mean, all of this is irrelevant to me. I really can't take amphetamines
yeah,
because I'm bipolar. It's arguable whether or not I have ADHD, but I mean, this is the thing too when it comes to these particular like models is there's a lot of overlap or
yeah,
in terms of what they're really describing,
yeah, yeah.
and I question. I mean, I'm sure it's not the best models that we could have for all this, you know. But it's who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're talking neurology. That's how that's like the cosmos. I mean, it's like it's
Yeah,
infinite.
totally.
You know, it's
Not a bunch of rectangles.
right, right, exactly, exactly. And like I say, the overlap, and that's what I think. This is sort of what I had talked about on the your YouTube channel. I responded was that is trying to figure out um, what is what. Um, and it's only I guess it's in a way it's important to me because it's a way of embracing who I really am, and knowing and knowing myself. But it also gives me a tool of knowing what my limits or what areas I need to say, don't give up because this is because of this, or as I look back at my life and there's career changes, educational I mean, how much I would have changed if I would have said, that's probably not a good profession to go into, or or looking at it from at least the right perspective and saying, can you or can't you, And I didn't really know my limitations because I was in denial of it all. So, so now I get to be out of denial, but do what I can with what time I've got left.
I mean, I think there's this. I think this kind of maybe gets back to the whole philosophy of our country, in the U.S. This kind of idea of like freedom as like the absolute lack of boundaries or whatever, or just you can do absolutely anything. This kind of idea that is very silly because obviously nobody can do everything, or anything they want. But I think the real freedom is in knowing what your limitations are, because then you know the space you have to work in, and you can stretch your limitations instead of just breaking them.
Hmm.
And you can, I feel like that's where the real, that's what allows for real creativity.
Yeah. Um, Part of also freedom though is responsibility, which people
For
seem to
sure.
want to forget.
For,
And that's
for
the
sure.
yeah, and that's the part that I mean, I can tell you from my perspective of having for so long denied everything, is it is such a wonderful feeling to one not have to, I call it masking, the denial I call masking, because you're constantly, and you're masking from yourself, which is what's weird.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
which yeah, I, yeah, that's that response I'm laughing at, because it's like everyone's like, yep, that's me too, that's me too. So I don't know. There goes my tangent thinking. I have no idea what I was going to say. See, it will come back here, but yeah, just life is a lot different. It's a lot better. It's been, like I say, trying to figure this puzzle out. It's been fun. I mean, I say fun. It's been, it's putting resolve on a lot of things in the past,
Yeah.
and that's
Makes
what's
sense.
been. So it's like it really, it's almost like your life is all happening at once in some ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. You have to reinterpret all your experiences.
exactly. Yeah, especially and family dynamics, and even now, I was saying to a friend, I said, I didn't expect this to change my family dynamics now, and I think it's because I'm I'm really looking at, because everything I did, this is weird. It's almost like a psychological masking. It's like you chose to look at things in certain ways, like family relationships and dynamics, and friends, or my own potential, or um, things that have happened and why they happened, and all these things. You start. Um, it's it's a I want to say it's a lie. Uh, and it's one I can remember thinking about it too, and like it was like I could feel the obligation, and I sort of denied or ignored the resistance to it. Like, and I'm not saying like I really like vanilla, but I'm going to eat chocolate ice cream. Although I guess sometimes that would be a good example. But um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm at a loss right now. I don't know how to go any further on that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird, subtle. I mean, I don't know. It just one thing that's really been driven home to me lately is how damaging it is to suppress yourself. Um, I mean, there's certainly some impulses we might have or whatever that we shouldn't follow through with, but suppression isn't the answer. You have to move through it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think with kids too. I know these are I have so many theories in my head that go around. It's like, not only about myself, but then just looking at the whole scope of autism, I guess, and but thinking about that stage where kids are having the most trouble as really young. I mean, preschool even. what they're trying to deal with. All kids are like, they're thrown into this body and this mind, and they're trying to, desperately learn how to control it and understand it. And then you throw autism on it to where you've got whatever sensory going on or whatever cognitive thing going on. And it's just no wonder, and I don't, I mean, they say kids are delayed and everything. It's like, it's probably, it's as much overwhelm as, and you're setting these huge foundations as children. You're not just doing little categories of stuff. You're like, what is the answer to this? Does that make sense to you? Or it's just like
Yeah.
it seems like we think in such really broad, all-consuming, all-meaning terms as children. Um, but anyway, those I just there goes my thoughts again. I So anyway,
I have a friend who has non a non-speaking autistic child,
uh-huh.
and it's interesting. I mean, I didn't have that experience, as a child. Obviously I speak now. Um, you know, I was never really cast as being that other, I guess. But it's been interesting to hear and see her perspective on this and hear about how he's doing. I mean, it's just clearly very hard, and it's hard for both of them because she's very she has a lot of empathy for him, and she really does her best to be a good mother, but she doesn't understand necessarily. Like, she can tell what he's going through to some extent, and she definitely, um, unlike some people with non-speaking autistics, really, really, she sees as much as she can what he's expressing with his body and with his face and with his actions. Um, but there's still a big gap there, and he goes through some really difficult things. He has other health problems, and so it's trying to be an advocate for him and trying to be close to him and have intimacy is a really unique challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And there's and this is kind of where, okay, I might say something a little bit controversial here. I love the neurodivergence movement a lot. one of the one of the problems I have with some of the rhetoric is there's there's this idea that gets put out that the only thing we're suffering from is other people's misunderstandings and their oppression of us. And I think I think there's an extent to which that's huge. That stuff is huge and has really been um, not addressed. It's just not been addressed how we frame all kinds of disabilities. And neurodivergences. And definitely that needs to change. But at the same time, I think there are some very inherent challenges that we have. Um, I think for all humans, there's inherent challenges in finding ways to have brotherhood with each other. It's really what it comes down to,
Yeah.
and especially when it comes to cognitive differences, that's a factor. It's a challenge, and sometimes it's a challenge that maybe at the moment can't be overcome. Um, so I don't know what my point is. I
Specific.
guess
Well,
that's
I mean, let me ask you then. You mean specifically uh, when you say brotherhood? You mean as in friendships or just in bonding with people? Um,
I guess I mean intimacy,
okay.
connection, um, because at least from my point of view, in my worldview, that's the that's the goal, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of very real barriers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we're still almost cavemen, like some way in some ways, if you know what I mean. It's like it's we're very there's a very primitive side of us all still. Um,
Yeah, well, and again, aside from that, we have inherent differences from each other. We have inherently different perspectives that we're never going to completely understand one another.
Yeah, true.
But I think it's worth making the effort, I
Oh,
guess. Is
sure.
kind of,
Yeah,
you know.
and I think, and if you're talking about in the differences, if there's like neurological differences, then it's, I think there's you have to have a suspension of your interpretation of what your expectations are based on your own experiences, so that you know what
Yes,
you're calling normal. You know, that's my
exactly.
normal
That's
experience, but yours is a different experience. So what is your
that's
normal?
why my,
That needs to be the
that's why my YouTube
conversation.
channel is called Theory of Mind.
Yeah.
That's where the name comes from, right?
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
you know the idea of theory of mind. Do you know the idea of theory of mind?
No, explain.
Oh, okay. So this is something that they talk about with autism specifically, because they originally said that people
Did you
on the
say
autism
theory of mind?
theory.
Theory. Okay, it broke up a little bit. We had a little bit of a disconnect there in the audio. So, I, okay, yes, I've heard of theory of mind, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, um, so I mean, it's basically the idea of being able to put yourself in someone else's
Right.
shoes, and the idea of like sort of being aware that your experience isn't the only
Yeah.
experience. And there's many layers to this. Like there's this kind of primitive layer as a kid where we really actually understand that somebody might be somewhere else and not see the same thing we do. That's very basic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it gets more, there's more that unravels as we get older and learn to relate to each other on deeper levels. There's all kinds of things about our experience that most of us don't question or assume are universal without ever thinking about it.
Yeah.
um, and it's not until we do the work of engaging with others and really questioning those assumptions, um, that we can start to see what else exists, or even ponder that.
Yeah.
Because again, because there's other people's experiences we'll never understand, but we can have a sense of, we can know that we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you know, this is what I was talking to. This is sort of the other side of what I'm saying, is that we need to self-advocate. So we need to, when there's that opportunity there that someone says, you're different, and not in a bad way, but like, oh, I mean, and I'm saying this from, I've got my normal, what's your normal? And to be able to say, you know, yes, I'm autistic. And then to explain what that experience is. I mean, that's how these barriers are going to fall, is when that information starts to get, we all share who we really are and are open to sharing with others. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it takes work for all of us to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, and again, that's what I think what I'm doing here, what you're doing on your channel, and what I see a lot of people doing. I have so much hope, with the internet and the fact that we're sitting here doing something in our living rooms or whatever that would have been $1 million worth of equipment 20 years ago, you know, or
Yeah,
whatever. And people just are like, oh yeah, well yeah, you could get on YouTube now. It's like, no, wait, you can get around the world on YouTube now. I mean, you can, you know, and so we got to use this. We got to. This is one way that we can really reach out to people and
yeah,
make these connections, and it's such a cool tool in that way.
yeah. That's what I love about YouTube.
Yeah,
is is just getting a quick, peek into somebody else's
yeah,
person, somebody else's life.
yeah. Well, you know, I think we're probably getting probably close to 45 minutes or more. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Um,
gotta go.
and I hope we can do this again. You know, if you want,
Yeah,
that'd be cool. And we'll maybe get a little more organized in our thoughts here. But I'd still like to do the stream of mind thing, because it's just it goes interesting places. But I still want to eventually do something where maybe you and I come up with a topic and say we're going to do 15 minutes on this, and
yeah,
do some prep on it. And if there's information or research required, and do something like that.
yeah. I'll let you know. I've been a little dry on thinking of topics lately, which is
Okay.
why I haven't really been my channel. But I'll let you know if I come up with something good.
Well, just looking through what we've done today, I think we could probably pick out quite a few topics. I was actually tempted to go, let's talk about that. But then in my mind, of course, that's why I need to get more organized, because I'm just like all over the place.
For sure.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Elizabeth, and we'll talk with you soon. Thanks, everyone, and we'll get this edited out, and I'll send that to you right away. I'll send it to you. Hopefully, I'll have it ready and to upload. It takes a good like 6 hours, 8 hours to upload. So, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you again, Elizabeth.
Okay. Bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.